My name is Sunil Kaushal, and I'm the head of strategic relations for INZBC, and it's my privilege to invite all of you from India and from New Zealand to our second day of the hybrid INZBC 2021 summit being held today online. And firstly, as we start, I just want to congratulate the Black Caps on winning the ICC Cricket Test Championship against India. What a wonderful victory. And yes, I think the team of 5 million is really rejoicing. And those of us who are Kiwis of Indian origin and in descent, we are very privileged. We won either way. With me, I have a distinguished panel. I have New Zealand Minister Phil Twyford, Honorable Phil Twyford, and I also have India's Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, with me. And just to give you a brief background, we had a lovely day yesterday here in Auckland, where we had an online session also with ministers and different captains of industries from India. And today it's all online. You've got the online link, and I can see about 77 people already online. So welcome everyone from India and New Zealand. We will have the introduction by Earl Rattray, and then followed by speeches by Minister Phil Twyford and Amitabh Kant, and then a Q&A session. So it's my privilege to invite Earl Rattray, who is the treasurer of INZBC, as well as the MD for Dairy Link. Earl has a distinguished career in dairy. He was the founding director of Fonterra Cooperative Group, which is one of the biggest in the world dairy industry, and also the inaugural chairman of New Zealand dairy companies. His interest includes obviously dairy and agriculture, and he has a lot of interest in India, especially in the dairy farm, which he has in partnership with some of the entrepreneurs in Haryana. It's my privilege to invite Earl Rattray to come and give us an overview and welcome all the attendees. Earl.
Well, thank you, Sunil, and I would Davio or Sajano Namaste, Tēnā koutou, katoa, and welcome to everyone. As Sunil said, we had a great day yesterday, and I think today will be just as insightful and just as interesting for us all. But before we begin this session, I just did want to reflect for a minute on yesterday's takeouts. For me anyway, and I think all of us, that we're familiar with the principle in business that structure of a business always follows the strategy. And I think it was a great reminder yesterday through many of our speakers that strategy in whatever we do is also dependent on culture. And without cultural alignment, business ties always struggle to hold. So I found it very encouraging. There was a consensus in this aspect that New Zealand and India are very, very well aligned. And it's certainly been my own experience. At a national level, there's certainly a commitment to the virtues of a transparent and predictable rules-based order that features all the key characteristics of civil society which support it and are fundamental to the long-term strategic decisions for any businesses. Which brings me to our keynote speakers today. Phil Twyford, the Honourable Phil Twyford. Phil is definitely one of those guys that gets all the tough jobs, and his portfolio covers trade, it covers environment, it covers immigration, which is all very, very important and relevant to us. I know that Phil's also very close to the Indian business community in Auckland, and he feels the pulse very, very well, and we're very, very grateful to him for joining us today. Phil's going to be followed by Amitabh Kant, who who heads the NITI, IOG. That's the National Institute for the Transformation of India. And few places on earth are transforming faster and at greater scale than India. And I understand that virtually all policy of national importance passes across his desk in India, and I'm sure you'll all agree it's a great honour for us to have such a senior advisor to the Government of India join us for the summit. In the final sessions, we'll feature two senior trade policy executives, Pranav Kumar from the Confederation of Indian Industry, and Simon Tucker, who heads stakeholder affairs for New Zealand's largest exporter, Fonterra. In the final panel discussion, it's full of well-informed and experienced observers and influencers. And I'm sure that we're going to have a very, very engaging program. So welcome again to you all. Look, let's hope we get the best out of these very, very high quality speakers who are presenting to us today. So thank you, and Sunil, over to you.
Thank you very much, Earl. Really appreciate those kind words and laying the evening for us. It's my real privilege. I have done these on numerous of occasions for in community thing, but probably the first time I've done it for a business setting for New Zealand and India, and it's my real privilege to actually invite my local member of Parliament, Honourable Phil Twyford. He's the Minister of State for Trade and Export Growth. He's speaking in that capacity today. And as I mentioned, he's my Member of Parliament in Te Aratu. And his vision for New Zealand is to deliver hope and opportunity to all people. Briefly, he has been, with his background, he studied politics in Auckland and also headed Oxfam, director for New Zealand, and the Global Academy of Oxfam, based in Washington, DC. And upon returning to New Zealand, he has been serving the people of Te Aratu since 2008. He's held portfolios like Earl mentioned, the difficult ones of housing, transport, Auckland issues, disarmament and control. He's currently the Minister for Disarmament and Arms Control, Minister of State for Trade Growth, Associate Minister for Environment and Immigration. Phil, it's a real privilege to invite you at the summit, second day of India-New Zealand Business Council. Over to you, Phil.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Salam Alaikum. Good evening and good morning to you all. Earl and Sunil, thank you for this opportunity to be with you virtually today. The Business Council has put together an excellent event, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to contribute alongside such a distinguished lineup. And can I also acknowledge in particular at this event His Excellency Muktesh Padeshi, Indian High Commissioner, and Honorary Consul of India in Auckland, Bharf Dillon, and of course my co-panellist Amitabh Kant. Before I go any further, I want to acknowledge the tragic impact of COVID in India. Many of you will have deep connections to family, friends, colleagues and business associates in India now who are living through difficult times. He rā ki tua, better times are coming. India is at the forefront of the world's response to COVID-19 and its central role in vaccination distribution and production is testament to its generosity and its expertise. COVID-19 has placed an enormous strain on us all, and we felt that pressure in many ways. While it's first and foremost a health crisis, it has put unprecedented pressure on the way that nations engage with each other in what was already a pretty tough environment for multilateralism. New Zealand's response to this is to redouble our efforts to improve our connections with other nations. And our relationship with India should be no exception to this approach. You know, we have a warm and long-standing connection with India. And the point that I want to make today is that framing it solely in an economic context does a great injustice to its breadth. India is a country that has so much going for it in areas like technology, entertainment, and sport, and in politics, and yes, in business too. Our relationship reflects all of these factors and more. Some of our most prominent business people, entertainers, artists, politicians, and other eminent figures can claim Indian heritage. You know, we're travelling in more Indian-produced cars, buses, trucks, and motorbikes. And with e-commerce and app development, particularly vibrant parts of India's economy, it's increasingly Indian-developed apps that New Zealanders are turning to on their smartphones, like Ola or Zomato. Sport also demonstrates the rapidly changing nature of both India itself and the relationship between our two countries. While hockey and cricket, did I mention the cricket? Have dominated our perceptions of Indian sport, we now also see a number of New Zealanders and New Zealand-based football players making the switch to the Indian Super League, which, while only founded in 2014, has managed already to attract some of the biggest names in football, not least of whom is Wellington Phoenix's record goal scorer, Roy Krishna, who now has both Fiji and New Zealand claiming him as their own. Of course, there's one common strand to all of these aspects of the relationship, and that's the people of India, whether they live there or in the diaspora. I was fortunate last year to speak at the launch of a report on the economic contribution of New Zealand Indians, commissioned by the Waitakere Indian Association. For the first time, it quantified the economic activity of the Indian community. It found that the 5% of our population who are Indian contribute $10 billion to our economy each year. That's 3.3% of total GDP. It also found that Indians are on average more qualified, more likely to be in work, and are increasingly working in higher income industries and occupations. We are proud to have thriving Indian communities in New Zealand, including some who are relatively new to our shores and some who have been here for generations. And while around a quarter of the people in these communities were born in New Zealand, the remainder were born overseas, mostly in India and in Fiji. These communities are diverse, representing many languages, religions, and unique cultural traditions. Hindi is now the 5th most spoken language in New Zealand, and the Indian diaspora claims a greater share of our population than is the case in Canada, Australia, the UK, or the US. And the contribution of these communities is enormous and belies the modest share of our total population. Now, there is, of course, still more that we can do to empower our communities to reach their full potential to the benefit of everyone. Our first ever minister in this government of Indian origin, Priyanka Radhakrishnan, with her portfolio that includes diversity, inclusion, and ethnic communities, is spearheading these efforts, including the establishment of a new Ministry of Ethnic Communities, which will be the first time our ethnic communities have had that level of representation in government. The countries that are most effective in cooperating with others understand that relationships must be broad as well as deep, reflecting the increasingly borderless world in terms of our daily lives, the entertainment we enjoy, the food we eat, the technology we rely on, and the people that we interact with. In a similar vein, India's much discussed rise is not just something that occurs in a narrow economic sense, but instead is manifesting itself in a wide range of ways. And so should our bilateral relationship. Our trade links will benefit if we take this broad approach, and vice versa. Bilateral relationships then are much more than the flow of goods across borders. Of course, trade is an enabler, And the free movement of goods, services and investment has brought us all closer together for generations now. But it's only one part of the picture. If a bilateral relationship is a platform, then ours rests on several foundations. A strong political relationship born out of shared interests. Strong people-to-people ties underpinned by education and migration. And our businesses investing and exporting between our two countries. Strengthening our ties makes sense even before you consider the increasing role that India plays in the Indo-Pacific region, a region gaining even greater strategic significance of late. New Zealand recognises the positive role India can play in ensuring Indo-Pacific nations continue to embrace a cooperative, rules-based approach in the international sphere, something which serves us all well. But I think that for too long, successive governments have looked to India primarily as a market for our exports. It's true, of course, that businesses must be looking for new markets to diversify into. And yes, the government plays a critical role in enabling businesses to achieve that through free trade agreements. But that is not and cannot be the only string to our bow when it comes to New Zealand's bilateral relationship with the second most populous country in the world, a country in our own Indo-Pacific neighbourhood, and a country to whom a significant diaspora in New Zealand have deep family, social and economic ties. I think there will be all sorts of opportunities to tap into here, perhaps in industries like dairy, tech or public health, and that through a concerted strategic effort to elevate our ties with India, we could see our relationship truly flourish. Of course, there are a number of examples which demonstrate the wide range of collaboration that already exists between New Zealand and India, from apple production in Himachal Pradesh through to disaster response in the Pacific. Now, as it stands, we do not have a bilateral trade agreement or a regional trade agreement in place with India. And of course, we would love to see India join us in RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, at some point in the future. But ultimately, that's a decision for India to make. And for the time being, its decision is clear, and we respect that. RCEP is, of course, not the only way, though, that these ties can be strengthened. And the government is keen to explore other options for economic cooperation, including at the state level, recognising that India is a proud federal union of 28 states and 9 union territories, each with considerable autonomy and a distinctive cultural and economic identity. And I know that Australia has had considerable success with this approach, and I'm keen for us to talk about what we can do as a government to pursue this. I'd be interested in learning from you all where you think the opportunities might lie, but I want to offer some observations of my own. We need to be bold, and the partnership must be underpinned not only by trade, but with investment and information sharing, as well as the broader links I've discussed. As many of you will know, New Zealand has the #1 spot on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index, a metric that governments and investors watch closely. Over the last 3 years, India has made impressive progress, moving from a ranking of 130th to 63rd in the world. And the Indian government has shown interest in how we achieved our top ranking. Engaging together with India in a collaborative way about business practices, possibly through one of our officials level dialogues or through a new, less formal mechanism, should be explored further beyond what's taken place already. The better we understand one another's systems and methods, the better we can realise the opportunities. This sort of cooperation would not be new. In fact, there's a regular dialogue between India's Ministry of Finance and the New Zealand Treasury, and between India's Ministry of External Affairs and the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I know also some of New Zealand's most significant businesses operating in India have convened the India Investment Group, which aims to lift the level and quality and profile of New Zealand investment in India. The group's advising on how to grow that footprint, recognising the desire of India for greater investment. There are already more than 140 New Zealand companies investing in India, and several different industries have been singled out for growth opportunities. These include agriculture, tourism, education, high-quality foods, software, engineering, and professional services. I want to highlight one of the exciting examples that we are seeing in the relationship. A relatively nascent relationship is between the Christchurch Engine Centre and Indigo Airlines. The Engine Centre secured a multi-million-dollar contract for aircraft maintenance with Indigo Airlines earlier this year. And already they have provided servicing for half a dozen V2500 engines at around US $10 million each. This is a great example of combining a niche set of skills and expertise from New Zealand with a scale and proportion that only the Indian economy can provide. The relationship was nudged along with support from the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise Agency, with regulatory approvals and registration with India's Director General of Civil Aviation, as well as by the ministerial mission that then Trade Minister David Parker and Foreign Minister Winston Peters took in February 2020, where they visited Indigo Airlines to support this outcome. Many in our virtual room will be wondering what we're doing now specifically to ensure that economic links are sustained as the world edges its way through the pandemic and its economic fallout. Well, we've been working across the globe with our export partners, including India, to mitigate these impacts. And the underlying understandings that we all share within the Indo-Pacific region give us a firm foundation for this work. As you know, COVID-19 has exposed some real vulnerabilities in global supply chains. And right from the beginning of the pandemic, our government moved quickly to keep supply chains open for essential imports, to maintain connectivity, and to reduce trade barriers. We've worked closely with airlines to keep air links open for critical exports. And while global shipping routes have faced severe capacity constraints, we're working hard to see what we can do in that area too. As one of the largest pharmaceutical vaccine producers, we recognise India has a vital role in the global response to COVID. And we're grateful to India for its support in supplying critical medicines to New Zealand over the course of the pandemic, despite the pressures on global supply chains. And now, as a government, we're acutely aware that many businesses and exporters have been hit very hard by COVID-19. And that's why we've committed an additional $216 million to NZTE so that they can scale up their work with our exporters. I've talked a lot about the importance of people-to-people connections between our two countries. The pandemic has profoundly disrupted those relationships, and I want to acknowledge how difficult this has been for so many people. Separated families, businesses unable to recruit skilled workers, the overall disruption to our immigration system, and the inability of people to attend funerals, weddings, and significant life events that in normal times bring people together across continents. As we emerge from COVID, governments will restore the freedom of movement that we once all took for granted as soon as safety allows. Before I conclude, I want to share a couple of stories that I've come across in recent weeks of Indian migrants that highlight the values that connect our two countries. First, a tale of two brothers, Manoj Kumar and Sumit Kamboj, were named 2021 Share Farmers of the Year at the New Zealand Dairy Industry Awards. The two brothers are third-generation farmers who grew up in a small village on a 12-hectare family farm with 10 cows and a mix of other crops and animals, a far cry from the 460-cow dairy farm they now work in Ekatahuna. They migrated to New Zealand in 2010 and were employed as share milkers on a farm on the Mangaone River. And they've become highly respected members of their community. And recently they were applauded for their efforts in supporting members of the community, including a Wellington chef who lost his job in the lockdowns last year to retrain and enter the dairy industry. This is one of many success stories of those coming from India with their own unique set of values and history. And more recently, 2 Kiwi Indians were recognised in the Queen's Birthday Honours List. India-New Zealand Business Council Chair Samir Handa and Sergeant Gurpreet Singh Arora of the New Zealand Police were both made members of the New Zealand Order of Merit. Mr. Handa was recognised for his services to business and New Zealand-India relations, and this year's event is surely another example of his work in action. Sergeant Arora was recognised for 15 years of service to the New Zealand Police and to ethnic communities. And I want to acknowledge the incredible and positive impacts these two have made and these people continue to make on New Zealand and on our bilateral relations. When we look at the world, there is no doubt that there will be challenging times ahead. The pandemic has changed us in ways that we could not predict, and in many ways that we cannot reverse. What we can do is to continue to invest in people, in relationships, and in opportunity. The relationship between India and New Zealand is full of promise, and the examples that I've mentioned highlight its depth and the impact of India and Kiwi Indians on Aotearoa. But there is much more we can achieve together, and I know that our government is committed to doing this. We have the benefit of an energetic Indian expat community, and I'm a strong believer in harnessing this energy to the advantage of the relationship between our two countries. At least in the medium term, this potential will not be realised by technocrats and trade agreements, but by allowing the full richness of our connections to flourish, from entrepreneurs and investors to scientists and sports people. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you very much for that very insightful speech, Honourable Phil Twyford. We'll come back to you with Q&A. I can see a few questions coming through, but really you've got some really in-depth things that you want both the countries to work together, and not just about trade, but other facets of it that we need to look as the Indian diaspora and the business interest here in New Zealand grows towards India and vice versa. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate your time.